meeting of Monday, October 28th, 2024. To begin this evening, I'd like to offer tonight's town board meeting in memory of Frank Belliati, who is often in attendance at these meetings, who passed. And with that, I was thinking about invocations this evening, and really what I been dealing with since Friday or Thursday through the weekend into today is the sort of upheaval at the Weinberg campus. Right now, that's specific to the skilled assisted living facility, but there are a lot of people right now in Amherst who aren't sure where they're going. Some of them have been there for a very long time. And there are 300 employees who are continuing to work in spite of having checks bounce and their insurance canceled because they know that there's residents who aren't able to get out of there yet. So would ask you to keep them in your thoughts, the families and the employees, and hope we can see some good resolution for all of those people in the not too distant future. There's a lot to unravel in this situation, but there certainly are some people here at Amherst that are in a precarious spot. With that, I'd ask everybody please rise for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare on first in air. Oh, say go for a land of the free. Okay. With that, I'd ask our town clerk to please call the roll.
Supervisor Copa.
Here.
Deputy Supervisor Lavin.
Present.
Councilmember Berger.
Here.
Councilmember Zuccalla.
Present.
And Councilmember Marinucci.
Here.
First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. I'll motion to adopt those as they appeared in our agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Couple of items on the agenda, public hearing wise this evening. Resolution 818 on the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, the 2025 to 2030 CIP, and Resolution 819 Town of Amherst 2025 budget. Going to motion open both public hearings at the same time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What I'm going to do is I'll do a brief presentation, then we'll go through comments on the CIP and comments on the budget, respectively. All right, so not in the same order, the 2025 budget. Town budget sees an increase in the overall levy, in the increase in the amount of money raised in overall. That's significantly under the cap for the year. The resultant of that is going to be a 1.32% tax decrease for the year. So most people will see a decrease. And this is a graph that shows our budget allocations by fund. The largest of our funds is a general fund, followed by sewer and highway. Probably not a lot of surprise there. The smallest our funds are the sidewalk snow relief districts, and the central alarm, and then water. As I mentioned, the resultant change this year is a 1.32% or an average decrease of $27 on an average town home. The budget itself looks at a couple of issues. The first thing is we do project sales tax to be up, although we were a little careful and didn't take it up as high as we maybe could have. We also feel that there's a projected decrease in mortgage tax and cable TV franchise fees. Mortgage tax hasn't stabilized over the past couple of years, so I don't have a reason to think it'll go up. If we are fortunate enough to continue to see decreases in the federal interest rate, it could arc up a little bit more than what we're projecting it'll come in at, but we just want to be careful with where mortgage tax is overall. Mind you, when we're dealing with mortgage tax, a lot of it's these large parcel transfers that really change the nature of the mortgage tax, and not necessarily individual homes, although certainly an advantageous refinance climate would be helpful for that. In terms of assessed valuation, we did an assessment last year to make sure when we did the budget that we were comparing apples to apples. We adjusted for a 62% equalization. So when compared to last year's budget with the 62% equalization, which basically adjusts out the assessment or the reassessment, we grew still $582,890,000 in assessed property value. So that's without the reassessment. The town added close to $600 million in new property value. Credit a lot of our economic development activities with that. Certainly our biggest change since the COVID years. In terms of budget and appropriation and fund balance, this town board maintains a fund balance policy of 10% minimum. This year we are looking at again staying above the 10% minimum fund balance policy. We have heard arguments to go higher from Moody's. The biggest challenge that we have is, since it is a larger town with a larger budget, holding a higher percentage means holding a lot of cash in reserve. That we certainly want to maintain our reserve. We have done that, but we don't want to hold cash back in reserve artificially high. A couple of changes in the 25 budget to note. There is an additional $500,000 that is payment, something called a payment increment finance fee generated by the UBMD or the 716 Health Building. That is school district percent alone. 100% of that property's payment in lieu of tax is generated and comes into the town that goes to pay back the operations and the lease on the Northwest Community Center, along with paying back debt on infrastructure, including new ball fields. But there's that project has overperformed, and so we are recognizing extra funding this year. Again, we're maintaining an 11.54% total fund balance for the year. just to look at where some of the change has taken place. Personnel services really is the bulk of the change. You can see some increase in fixed assets. Part of that was because we're still at the time of the budget, we're still working on the CSEA contract negotiation. So it's recorded in fixed asset instead of personnel services. This board has since worked with CSEA to settle that contract. Again, in terms of changes, we see the mortgage tax again decreasing, projecting a couple of other decreases and then some increases. We've seen a huge uptick in terms of the senior center. We continue to see increases in employee health insurance contribution. And because of the interest rates being where they were, where last year we were looking at really negative borrowing opportunities, this year we're recognizing some interest in our investments. A couple other things again. So we already went through this slide, but the overall town, all the fund balances continue to be strong. And where we are in the process right now, so we're on 10/28/24. This is the third of 3 public hearings. We are still taking budget comments beyond the hearings. There is an email address, budgetcomments@amherst.ny.us. You can find the budget posted to our town website. There's a summary under the 2025 Citizens Budget Overview. It looks a little bit similar to what I just presented. When you submit comments, again, you can submit comments. The budget, under New York State law, budget locks in around November 20th. The board has time, if they want to amend the budget, to do so before then. And want to go through next is a debt overview presentation. It was presented originally at work session on September 16th by Linda Ewell, our finance director. It gives you a little understanding about how bands and bonds work. So bond anticipation notes or bands are short-term financing, typically for 1 year. Project can be kept in a band or rolled over for a maximum of 5 years, with financing required each year. Bonds are long-term financing, typically between 10 and 40 years. The maximum term for financing is determined by the period of probable usefulness. Once a project is rolled into a bond, the principal and interest payments are set for the term of the bond. Bonds can be refinanced under certain circumstances should interest rates decline. Maximum period municipality can finance an object or purpose through debt is known as a period of probable usefulness, or a PPU, which is determined by New York State local finance law. In a bond authorization process, the town establishes its capital improvement plan, or CIP, each year. This is a plan. It's not locked in. It's in conjunction with the budget process. When a department is ready to move forward with an approved project, a MAP plan and report, or an MPR, is submitted to the finance department for review and then to the legal department for processing. The legal department coordinates with bond counsel. In our case, that's Harris Beach, PLLC, who provides a bond resolution for placement on a town board agenda. One of several processes may be followed depending on the project. Projects with a PPU of 5 years or less become effective immediately upon approval of the bond resolution by the town board. Projects with a special district require a public hearing and become effective after the public hearing has been closed and upon approval of the bond resolution by the town board. Projects with a PPU of over 5 years, not in a special district, become effective after a 30-day permissive referendum period, which begins the day the town board approval of the bond resolution. All bond authorizations must be approved by a supermajority, 2/3 of the board's voting strength, in this case, 4 members of the board, town of Amherst. The town typically issues debt annually in a single borrowing in the fall. If there are larger projects which require earlier financing, a ban may be issued earlier in the year and then rolled into regular fall borrowing. This year, Moody's, well, we'll get to that in a second. The Comptroller's Office works with the town's municipal advisor. In our case, it's Capital Markets Advisors, LLC, and the town's bond counsel on finalizing the official statement, which outlines the borrowing. A credit rating for the issuance is obtained from Moody's Investor Services. The town's 2023 bond rating is a AA3, very positive. And in 24, we've been notified it will be a AA3 again. The borrowing is put out to market by municipal advisors. The town closes on borrowing typically in November. Projects with a 5-year PPU are typically kept in short-term financing bans for the life of the borrowing. Projects with longer PPUs are initially issued to short-term debt or ban and then rolled into long-term debt or bonds. Typically held in bands for 2 years and then rolled into bonds, may be held in bands for shorter or longer periods of time depending on what is projected for interest rate. And infrastructure projects such as road, sewer, and water may be bonded in 1 year. Our constitutional debt limit, the town has the power to contract indebtedness for any town purpose. The principal amount of debt cannot exceed 7% of the most recent 5-year average of full valuation of taxable real estate of the town. This is subject to certain exclusions and deductions such as water and certain sewer facilities. The town's constitutional debt limit as of 12/31/23 was 19.01%. The total debt less exclusions was, as of 12/31/23, was $177,813,691. The debt limitation was $935,448,000. The estimated constitutional debt limit at 12/31/24, the end of this year, is 17.3%. A total debt less exclusions of $178,389,354. Our debt limitation is $1,031,056,697. We had at the work session Jeff Storch from Harris Beach and Rick Gansey from Capital Markets. I would ask anybody with questions about town borrowing procedure to please refer to that budget email and submit your questions in our finance department, and comptroller's office would be happy to review them. Okay. So when we talk about debt, the town every year schedules a CIP. A CIP identifies and prioritizes large capital projects, their cost, and funding sources. It follows the town's debt management policies. It implements a comprehensive plan and public facilities plans. Generally involves the physical improvements with project costs in excess of $100,000 and involves new facilities or major repairs. Is not intended to fund routine maintenance. The town board is sole authority for adoption and amendments. However, the CIP is created through a review committee process. The town supervisor is the committee chair, planning board chairman, in this case, the comptroller, director of finance, town attorney, town engineer or engineering department designee, the planning director, director of economic development, the planning department staff to assist the process and organization. CIP review committee discusses the progress and status of previous 2024 CIP projects. Departments submit new project requests for the program period, in this case 25 to 30. Committees review and evaluate the new project requests. The supervisor then submits the recommended CIP to the town board with the budget. The town board reviews the recommended CIP during a public hearing, and the town board adopts the CIP, and that adopts with the town's operating budget. The 6-year program from 2025 to 2030 that includes 64 projects and a bonding value of $74 million. The amounts proposed to be funded in 25 include $19,300,000 in long-term bonding and $11,756,000 in other funding sources. including state and federal funds in terms of grants and or private sector contribution. This is a kind of breakdown of where our CIP bonding for 25 is. Most of it sits inside of water pollution control facility. Second, followed by paving, transportation, and vehicles. Then sanitary sewer system and recreation, parks, water lines, and others, including facility studies. A couple of the project breakdowns this year. The first one, our current plan for implementation at Central Park, we have $1 million grant for playground, $250,000 grant for splash pad, $500,000 grant for winter market. We're proposing to couple that with $1 million and self-performing grading and paving, developing a park in the southeast corner of the property. The second project has no town funding coming from debt. There is funding coming from the Costco project in terms of mitigation fees that match a large federal grant that we received for the enlargement of the intersection at Maple Road and North Bailey. That reconfiguration is meant to better move traffic on both roads and ease the burden on that corridor that creates backups. The largest project on our books this year and next year is a proposed change, new oxygen separation system at the wastewater treatment plant. Our sewer treatment plant functions with based on using bacteria to break down the sewage product. That bacteria requires oxygen. We currently have an oxygen system that over the past few years has started to become less reliable, and we've had to supplement by bringing in liquid oxygen. It's a very expensive process, and so last year we began looking at the idea of replacing our oxygen separation system. It's a 2-year process that requires in phase 1, which is equipment procurement and construction off-site, and then in phase 2 would be the site work and construction. We will be applying for state grants throughout the process, but this is a big project for our treatment plant. Another big project this year, the past years we've used some ARPA funding for this. Without ARPA funding available, we plan to co-blend some bond issuance along with some other mitigation fees to continue our sanitary lining and manhole rehabilitation. In this case, we're going to be focusing on the areas, north arrow to this is to the right. So we'll be focusing on the areas west of Bailey, between Bailey and Niagara Falls Boulevard, between Kenmore and Sheridan Drive. We have a couple of big water line projects to do this year, including the Pineview Drive replacement and Cimarron Drive replacement and a transit road replacement. We'll look at about $3 million in water line projects in 25. I think that's it for me. Response to that. So with that, I would ask people with comments or questions about the CIP to please come forward. That's the capital improvement plan. If you would, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Morganti, and I reside in Gettsville. And I just have a few comments on the capital improvements plan portion of the 2025 budget. As we're just explaining, with the current announcement of the coffee shop being planned on the corner of Maple and North Bailey, the capital improvements project includes construction of additional turn lanes on all 4 approaches. With the amount of traffic that is currently flowing through this area and the addition of Costco going in, we'd like to suggest a more comprehensive review of how to ensure that this area will not become overly congested and cause more issues for the town residents. As you are aware, we did bring to the attention of the town board the need for improvements to our already existing parks. There are only a few parks that were included for additional improvements in the 2025 budget. Residents have asked for more information regarding the improvements that are in the budget, and they've specifically requested it about the Evergreen Park. And are there any other parks that are in desperate need of repair also being considered? The highway building capital improvements is included in this budget, and glad to see that this area has received the town's attention for needed renovations. However, can you expand on the $115K budgeted for funding a study considering alternatives? What are those alternatives? And we have personally witnessed the deterioration of this facility, and $8,500 sounds like a drop in the bucket for improvements. We would like to request that this area be reviewed again and consider additional needed improvements. We have seen some improvements to the sound system at Town Hall, but would like to have included in the budget additional improvements. For example, an upgraded microphone at the podium. The video system that is used for meetings does not show an all-inclusive view of the meetings. And if presentations are being shown in the overhead area, it is not being transmitted to the public. And just so you know, I've been getting phone calls with the numbers that were put up there for the budget, and the residents are having a problem reading those numbers, and they said that there looks like there is a bulb issue going on. I'd just like to bring that to your attention. So we request that this area also be reviewed for a new video system in the 2025 budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ngaski, Youngs Road. I would like to request that an additional $200,000 be put in the capital improvements program. $100,000 for the year 2025, $100,000 for the year 2026. This money would be used to do a feasibility study for the redevelopment of the golf course at Westwood Country Club. It also would provide funding to bring a golf course architect who specializes in restoration of such facilities. And that leads me to what I started on Friday, phase 5, 6, 7, and 8 for the par 3 and the Audubon Golf Course. So let's assume that we're able to bring back Westwood Country Club is the town's municipal golf course. It'll be a beautiful facility. It was one of the finest country clubs in the area. When it was operating, it will be an amazing municipal golf course. So that's up and running. What do we do with the existing Audubon Golf Course? We suggest and once again, I want everybody to understand, this is a concept plan. This is the objective when we got together and created this concept plan was to show that there is a viable alternative to the failed plan that this board presented earlier this year, and also be fiscally responsible while going about it. So the golf course has been rebuilt. We now have Audubon. What we are recommending is in phase 5 is to rebuild the east side or the back 9 holes of the Audubon Golf Course into what we call today a short course. We used to call it an executive course. For those people who lived in Amherst, it would replace Oakwood Golf Course, which was shut down by this board, not Marinucci, but other members. So we have this new short course would take the back 9 holes east side of the golf course. Now that opens up the par 3. The par 3 should, in our opinion, should be sold for housing development. The housing developers that I've talked with say they could put approximately anywhere from 100 to 200 townhomes on that property. I would suggest that the town would go to an RFP. Let's see how much they'll pay, and let's see what kind of plans they could bring forward. But there is a need for housing in this town. We all know that. Also, by the sale, that will pay for redevelopment of the back 9 as the short course. The next phase 7 would be the expansion of the Audubon driving range. This has been very lucrative for the town. Even to my it surprised me how much participation is going on at that driving range. A lot of it comes from the UB students that love to come over there and hit balls. We want to expand that into a larger golf center. Everything in the front is golf. The beauty of this is we already have a clubhouse, we already have a parking lot, we have the greens for the short course, we have the irrigation system. It will be a minimal expense to do the conversion. This leads us to phase 8, the backside of the golf course. And this is where it's really open. And I'm going to ask the supervisor when we discuss the budget, because I've had a lot of questions about the pilots. If we're able to put a couple more, if the market will bear, a couple more UBMD facilities on the back end of the golf course. If that's not there, we can put senior housing back there. Everything going on to Millersport Road. Nothing is coming towards Maple. Everything is going to Millersport Road, coming in and going out. Now, let's just use the senior housing example. If we could put 4 major complexes back there with pilots, this will pay, or probably the majority of all the costs for what we presented. That was the goal of the group, is how do we bring back Westwood, keep it green, with the golf course it will remain green, how to get that clubhouse functional so that it doesn't become a financial burden to the community and eventually torn down, because that's the direction it's heading. And so, like I mentioned before, I want to thank everybody for the calls I got this weekend, the emails, the text messages, the Facebook, especially people from Snyder. I'm not going to comment on the Snyder situation. That is open. It's hopefully something that could be resolved with Benderson. That's up to this town board, but thank you.
Jane Cox, Harlem Road. I was just listening to the presentation about the Maple Bailey intersection, and I'm wondering why that's a one-year project when we all know the amount of traffic that's going to be generated once Costco and the other buildings in the development are built on North Bailey Road. Is there a plan to widen that section of the road to handle the traffic, or are we just doing the signal and the turn lanes at that intersection? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, town board members. My name is Thomas Frank. And I want to thank you for attending the senior center meeting the other night. It was informative. And regarding the bond authorization process and the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan, that the bonding for the infrastructure management and maintenance of the water lines, the sewer lines, the highway storm sewers, these are issues which the Ellicott Creek is the lifeblood of the Amherst Central Park Greenway, and that the as far as the watershed, the groundwater table, there's a need for developing some environmental stabilization. And what is suggested, has been suggested, has to do with the long-term 2025 through 50 project planning purpose for using the Glen Park Joint Board as the lead agency for an updated intermunicipal cooperation agreement. Okay, that they're meeting over there right now. uh, to discuss this between the Village of Williamsville and the town of Amherst for the Amherst Central Park Greenway. The Greenway is a statewide program in New York State having to do with the recreation and historic preservation, but it's also tied into the Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor and the Niagara River Greenway, relicensing of the Niagara Power Project. That these issues having to do with infrastructure are tied in as far as the watershed. And that includes the walkable village, phase 2, as far as out here. The traffic, as far as the GBNRTC, the Greater Buffalo Niagara Transportation Council, their regional transportation 2050 plan is the same 2050 plan for the, as far as the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, that these are all interconnected issues, that this is a strategic geographic location, which, yeah, I mean, really, the reason why the village was incorporated in 1850 was to connect the creek out here to the Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor. This is where the limestone on the Indian Trail was made into concrete to send to Lockport. That you've got national historic significance that needs to be put into context. That and I want to bring this to your attention, as far as the Bank of America, the revitalization and restoration of the asbestos contamination that's down in the boiler, down in Amherst Central Park, that you were to be in touch with Andrew Dukan regarding the McNamara to the permission given to Dan Rizzio, the facility manager for the town of Amherst, to give him permission to get in with the architect so that they can.
Tom, yeah, thank you. We're going to continue on. There's some other people who would like to speak.
Okay, so you're going to be in touch with them. We've only been waiting about
the
3 or 4
departments
weeks.
have already. Okay,
They
thanks,
said
Tom.
they haven't heard from you.
The department's been in touch with them. Thank you. Okay.
We're looking forward
All right.
to,
Thanks.
as
Thank
far
you.
as an environmental education center tied into the school districts in the Williamsville, Amherst, and Sweet Home.
Tom, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anybody else on the CIP?
Good evening, Dennis Holben. Can you put the Westwood Country Club, there you go. Is that the Westwood Country Club? There you go. I was listening to the gentleman earlier, Chris Dombrowski, I believe. I like some of the ideas that he spoke of. I think what this board should do, and they shouldn't miss this opportunity. Some of you may only be on the board for another year. I don't think you should miss this opportunity to perhaps, instead of stepping in something, you might want to come out smelling like a rose. Perhaps if you start like a committee, and I'd be willing to be on that committee. I've been doing construction work for 40 years, over 40 years. Had my own business. I know a little bit about construction. I think Chris here seems to know quite knowledgeable about golf courses, and bring in some other people. I don't know about the money situation, the $200,000. I don't like throwing money at things and hoping that it turns out, but if you need to bring in some, the town has engineers that are already on the payroll. Maybe you can bring in a golf pro, and you can get this thing up and running. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I'd be happy to volunteer and be on that committee. And I would imagine Maybe Chris would too. He's nodding his head. Chris would be on it. Maybe we get some participation from the citizens of Amherst that want to see something done with this, rather than just you folks working on it. You know, you guys are overworked. I know that. So that's really all I have to say. I have one more question. Why does Mike Zucala's nameplate bigger than everybody else's? I noticed that. Mike, you want to comment on that? It's all right. You don't have to. All right. Thank you. Little levity never hurts, you know. Thank you. Appreciate your time and concern. And thank you, Brian, for addressing this, what I just said.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else on the CIP? Before we switch gears and talk about the budget, I'll address a couple of the questions or comments that I heard. Starting with Andrea's comments. So this year, Briarhurst Playground is scheduled for replacement. So there's a couple of projects that are not necessarily taught. So we are replacing, hopefully with a grant, the playground at Clearfield. We also put money into budget lines this year for more parks repairs that used to be in the CIP. So they're just moving over to the budget side or operational. But we are looking at, we do have a list of each one of the playgrounds that we are slated for replacement and for parks repairs, but that's where those are the ones that we've highlighted first. I know that Creekwood Heights is up there. There's a new playground going in the northwest corner of the town up at Tupelo Park, which is a relatively new. That whole playground's new, but we think that'll help the Creekwood community up that way too. And then we've got a number of other improvements that we'll make throughout the year. But what we're going to really, focus on is where we can find some grant resource. So we are getting restroom facilities at North French Soccer. Thanks to the private sector, the Green organization is going to build that as they do a project on Millersport. And we have a grant from Assemblywoman McMahon to supply the infrastructure for that facility. We're also putting restrooms at Paradise Park. I know there's a number of pickleball players who will be excited about that, thanks to a grant from Legislator Green. And so there are other projects that just might not be broken out for whatever reason. Specifically in the highway building, so the money that we are putting money into the roof, which is like an immediate must repair. But we have to do a facility study. That study is really to tell us whether we should be considering a new prefabricated building or we should continue to put money into the building that's there. And most of that is because we have to look at the condition of the structural steel. It's caustic because the plow trucks come in there with salt. So this is typical of a lot of highway buildings, but we want to make sure that we have sound structure if we're going to continue to rebuild it instead of replacement. And that's what the study is going to tell us, is make a decision between where we're going. And then regarding the town hall presentation equipment, the equipment wouldn't rise to the level of a CIP, so it's not in a CIP. It goes into the ITIP program, which is our IT's infrastructure annual borrowing, or not borrowing, our annual operations budget. So that's where anything improved in here would come from. Regarding the Maple Bailey corridor question, so the idea here was we did something in terms of a generic environmental impact statement. We started working on that back in like 2020 or 2019, and looking at all the changes, including the plan change to the Boulevard Mall. We included big box growth, where Costco and Dick's are going, albeit not necessarily knowing it was going to be a Costco at the time, and projected what would have to change. This intersection's the primary bottleneck in the corridor, though it's not the only thing that needs to change. So adding to the queue time at this intersection, plus alleviating some of the backup at Meyer and Bailey by adding new lit intersections at, the two names are going to escape me. The one is on the corridor on the shopping center itself, and then Romney is the second one. Both of those changes are being made as part of that Costco project, and so they're not part of the town project. The town project is this portion. You are right, there is a planned coffee shop going where the old Scotch and Sirloin was. That coffee shop was planned in conjunction with the right-of-way taking for the widening. So I know that that's reflected. Regarding Westwood and bringing golf back, I think Dennis and Chris, there's a lot of ways to think about how that might happen. And I would say that over the next year, this town board is going to explore a lot of opportunities on the Westwood site, given that we don't have the musical fair space or the B&HV space coming. So there's acreage to play with in terms of the overall plans there. And so we'll see where that takes shape. But again, this is sort of a phase one, kind of address the community in that area, especially the Morningside community. Some of the other communities there benefit from a playground at that location. That lawn near that fence line, that's almost as the playground, the lawn, the splash pad, that area is almost as big as what we think of when we think of some Bassett and some of our other parks. So it's a significant space to bring online. But thank you for that. And and just to acknowledge that the board listens to ideas. I'm going to credit somebody who's in the attendance tonight, Mr. Howard, for bringing up to our attention, and we really did drill down on this with the people from Holiday Valley who make snow and the people who operate the New York City ice rinks. But the idea of the ice ribbon is something that we're looking at in terms of what are the usable days versus what would the expense be. And so that's something that we've considered, talking to people who have to deal with the elements and make snow or ice in what we've seen as warmer winters. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to the budget side and ask for comments on the budget. Again, just please restate your name and address for the record.
Chris Strongoski, Youngs Road. First of all, I've been attending town board meetings for over 20 years. Actually goes back to 1987, a little longer. And this is the most transparent budget process that I've ever seen. Congratulations. All right. It's unfortunate what had to happen to get us here, but at least we got here. The question I have for the supervisor, if you could bring up that UBMD PIF pilot payment in lieu of taxes. I had a lot of questions over the weekend from people. How does the pilot work? How does it get applied to a building or facility? Is that $532,000? Is that a one-year shot, or is that going to be a continual payment?
Yeah, it's an annual repeating payment.
So so that's a very beneficial pilot. So if you could explain, how does a facility get designated for a pilot, and how does that happen? Thank you.
Okay. I'll answer again. I'll come back and answer a bunch of these at the end. Anybody else on the budget for this year?
John Traver at Mount Vernon. Could you put up the display where the expenditures for the LED project came up? LED or lighting, expenditures for lighting?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where I would show that specifically. I don't know. Daryl, which one? Oh, the pie chart. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the lighting budget looks like $4 million,
Yeah,
$50,000. Does that reflect any savings from the LED project?
it does. I'm sorry. I'm going to go through all these at the end, but I'll answer that. Sure.
Jane Cox, Harlem Road. I think everybody in the room wants to know how this budget is going to affect their taxes. With our new reassessments, my school tax bill increased by over $500. So my question is, since my property reassessment increased by more than $100,000, how is it possible that my property taxes will be going down in February?
Okay. Anything further on the budget?
Good evening, Karen Howard, 194 Roycroft in Snyder. I have a few miscellaneous questions. So my first question is with respect to the debt, because it's still not clear to me. I know we're in this budget, we're adding $19 million of debt, but I couldn't find exactly how much we're repaying. I did find that in our operating budget, we've got $23.6 million of debt payments in the 2025 budget. And my question, does that include interest? Like when on that line that says debt, I'm thinking it includes principal and interest. And so I'd like to know how much the actual debt balance is going down, because I couldn't find a 12/31/25 balance. I saw the projected for 24, but not the 25 budget. So that's one question. And then another question, because my background is accounting and finance, but not governmental. So I don't, my question is, when you say you have a fund balance policy of 10% and you're actually slightly higher than that, what is it a percent of? So it's just a simple question. Included in the budget materials online, there's a page that says that there's a fund balance analysis referenced on page 7 of the budget book. It says that there's a fund balance analysis, but I couldn't find a fund balance analysis. So that's why I was asking the question. And then this is kind of a general question. So these presentations that you're doing at these meetings, I didn't find them online. I found other budget materials, but not these actual presentations, which I think are helpful. They kind of put things in perspective and, kind of have some things like highlighted with this, circled and some comparisons and things. And so my suggestion would be to include these, for the residents to be able to refer back to them. And I also did see, so I was glad to hear you say, Brian, that you're still accepting comments from residents, because there could be people listening tonight that still have comments. Because I saw online, it says that comments were due October 20th, which when I saw that, I was like, that's before 2 of the 3 meetings, So anyway, so I was glad to hear you say that you're still accepting comments. My next comment, so this is, I guess, a little more meaty. So overall, the budget levy increase, I would say, is disappointing, given, that we had a significant increase last year. And so I know you say it's not final yet until you actually approve it. So I would just like to strongly encourage you to take a harder look at opportunities to actually reduce costs. I realize, there's inflation and the largest increases in the 2025 budget over 2024 seem to be debt, benefits, and contractual. So I know some of those are inflationary or, contractual, so they are what they are. But that just means that you need to take a harder look at other costs and to see where you can cut. The minor tax rate decrease, I would say, okay, it's nice to see it's a decrease, but it's just, minor compared to last year's increase. So I just strongly encourage you to take a harder look at that. And then finally, I just want to say, I was at the meeting on Friday at the senior center, and the audio was really good. So your mics and the residents, microphone, the sound, and the mic and the sound, within the room and online, because I went back and watched it online, were all really good. So, maybe you could replicate that here. Thank you.
Dennis Hoban. I just was wondering, for the sake of the budget, on the Westwood project, some of the things that you're proposing, I believe the playground was a grant, $1 million grant. The splash pad is $250,000, if I recall. Is that a grant as well? Okay, and there's something, there was a little vagueness then. There's a ice ribbon, I'm to understand. Is that are these all definite things that you're moving forward with, the ice ribbon? Okay, because I have a question on that. It's my understanding that these ice ribbons operate much better in colder climates, believe it or not, than what we have in Buffalo, New York. And it was suggested, I believe, to the town of Amherst, that an ice ribbon would not really work in Buffalo because to refrigerate that in wintertime when we have thawings like January thaw and so on and so forth, it won't function properly. Just won't work. Be a fiasco. But
I think that's what I was acknowledging. But
oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Hello? I misunderstood. I think you do need a new microphone, new sound system here, by the way. So that was my. And am I leaving something out? There was a trail that was supposed to be built. Am I missing something? Okay, no problem. On Friday, I was at the budget meeting at 10 o'clock at the Senior Citizens Center, and I was wondering, the gentleman that speaks quite often, Tom, he actually brought up a very interesting concept, but I wasn't sure if it was a trail or a bike path, but what I was thinking was if you connected some of these bike paths along the Ellicott Creek and had that go to the Westwood Country Club, and that might be a pretty interesting thing. And and over on North Forest right now, there's also a bike path right there now, and I use that bike path quite a bit. It goes all the way to Niagara Falls Boulevard. You might be able to tie some of these things together so that people could safely get there on a bicycle or even walk on that bike path. The other thing I thought of, and actually this was not my idea, but I think it was the gentleman that was up here before, Chris Dombrowski's, that if you put this playground and the splash pad at the Westwood Country Club, it would be very difficult for children. Obviously, children are going to be using these facilities, these new ones that you have these grants for. They're going to have to cross Sheridan Drive or North Forest. And I got to tell you, last Saturday, I went for a bike ride on that North Forest bike path, And it's pretty crazy getting across Sheridan Drive or North Forest. And I can't imagine a young child trying to cross that, those intersections or those streets. It might be better, and this was not my idea. I believe it was Chris's idea. I think he was talking about this on Friday. That you put it at the Harlem Road Center, a splash pad, and this playground, because at the Harlem Road Center in Snyder, children could walk there very easily. Matter of fact, I grew up on Washington Highway. When I was 4 years old, my mother used to make me walk from Washington and Saratoga all the way to School 18, that's what it used to be called, School 18. And so I know you can walk there if you're a kid. You got to cross Harlem Road, but still, it's not like crossing Sheridan Drive. So those might be better suited at the Harlem Road Community Center rather than putting it at the Westwood Country Club. And then the Westwood Country Club could be, an open canvas for when you start up this committee that me and Chris are invited to belong to. Brian, thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Don Smith, North Lawn. Good evening to our town board. I'm first interested in the process going forward with the remaining time before you finalize the budget and what the public will be able to do in terms of providing input and knowing what changes have been made since today's budget has been presented to the public. I want to track both the changes and allow the public to actually have input into the process and know what that is so they can be informed on the process. That's the first thing. Second thing, on any changes whatsoever that you do to the Amherst Central Park / Westwood Country Club, it's got to be an open process. And by what I mean by that is a very open process, not just between you and Chris, okay? It's got to be the entire population of Amherst. That means open. You know what I mean? Open means transparent. That means we get to see it and talk about it, comment it, and balance this against the needs of the entire community. Nobody's even talking about the entire community yet. Somebody's got to say something about that. Nobody's even said anything about that. So that means we got to look at all the aspects: who wins, who loses, what it costs, who gets left out in the process, and what kind of deals go on in the background. All right? So nobody trusts you right now. So we got to keep it open. You know what I'm saying? It's got to be an open process. And the final thing on that is everything comes down to priorities, which means you got to be obviously transparent on the priorities that the board has. And frankly, the priorities of the board should track very closely with the priorities of the residential population and the taxpayers. So that's something we've got to make sure that the priorities sort of match. My personal opinion, one of the problems we run into was we had a mismatch on those priorities. And frankly, the priorities that we had were not the priorities that you had. It's better that we match, at least try to, in order for us to come to some sort of reasonable conclusion between the people who elected you, the people who pay the taxes, and the people who, in the end, will be paying the long-term bonds for, quote-unquote, 40 years. Okay? I ain't going to be here at 40 years. So what does that really represent, and what's the implication of that? So please be open. Please be transparent. Please align yourself with the public. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Judy Ferraro, 213 Donnelly. I would like to second everything that Don Smith just said. The people that live, especially around Westwood, have to be in the loop, and right now they are not. Thank you.
Danny Farrell, Park Haven Drive. Actually, I wasn't even going to speak tonight, but uh, concerning the Amherst Central Park, with the Westwood has a building there, right, that they used to have for a clubhouse or whatever. And am I to assume possibly that there was some kind of a hall there or something that they used to have dinners or things like that with? The reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm a retired professional photographer and I've dealt with a lot of banquet halls and things like that. Suggestion to the board, if you want to do a moneymaker or something like that, is possibly if you're renovating the building to have it accommodate like weddings or corporate parties or things like that. This is something that you could, get money for or whatever. I don't know what the insurance implications or anything like that is or whatever, but I'm sure that there's probably ample parking there or whatever. But I think it's something that you might want to look into or consider because it would be an additional income to the town if you're able to work something like that out. The only other thing is, Mr. Laban, I do want to thank you for the service that you provided to our nation with your commitment to the folks down south there for the hurricane and whatnot, and I'm sure they appreciated it. Okay, thank you.
Anything further? So I'll just go through a couple of some responses to the comments. So pilots are complicated. I'm not going to pretend to get through all of this in a future meeting. I'm happy to talk about pilot process. Pilots can be written in one of two ways. They can be written by municipality, or they can be prepared by our IDA. In the case of the UBMD 716 health pilot, that pilot was negotiated between the school district and the town and prepared through our IDA. The pilot recognized that the land that the building was built on had never been taxable, that in order to accommodate the building, the town had to build new football facilities, new softball facilities, and that school district and the town had a shared interest in making sure that we built a community center in Northwest Amherst. So the pilot was conditioned on providing for youth sports, open space recreation in that area, including infrastructure, like the extension of Maple and that would go back to pay debt on the new sports facilities that were generated, and then that the pilot would support the lease and operations for the Northwest Community Center, which it does, which is at North Point. If you haven't been there, it's a great addition up in that area. The pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes, and it basically takes the money that would normally go to the school district and the town, collects it, and uses it for stated purpose. So in the town's case, that 500 that I showed you, it's not all of the funding, but that funding will be used against some of the infrastructure costs that I talked about before, the new sports facilities and venues and debt. That's an overview. I can go into more later. Regarding the LED project and the street lighting, and so yes, when we calculated this year's lighting district budget, we basically took the amount of principal and interest payments on the street lighting project, plus we're able to put money into a capital reserve fund so that we have money to do replacements and future maintenance, and it covers all the maintenance. So it's already at a wash. As we move on, it'll generate savings. Once the project's closed out, we actually think that we'll have savings to return. In other words, we won't have spent all of the bond allocation or the bond allowance. So the project should continue to pencil correctly moving forward. But we are putting money away for capital. We are paying off the debt on the project. And we are kind of washing where we are in terms of that. That percentage isn't an increase. That's the percentage of overall town funds that is represented by our lighting district budget. So on the question of, I'm skipping ahead, sorry. How does the budget affect taxes with the reassessment? So what we did was, again, in order to compare apples to apples, last year, 2024's budget to 2025's budget, the comptroller's office created an adjustment that took into account the overall assessment growth, the big change through the reval, and basically said, look, if that reval weren't there, would we decrease or increase tax? And if the baseline, we're able to decrease tax, then when we map the change, right, the reval didn't just happen on 1 or 2 properties or 5 or 6 properties. It happened across the board on all properties. So as all properties lifted up, right, the reval gets applied across the board. The underlying condition, though, of everybody paying less tax is still in place. That condition exists. To the point of how much and whether you should decrease the levy, or what you should do with some of those adjustments. I will say this year's increases are very inflationary. They're in personnel, the fixed cost or the contractual is held to a minimum across departments. And while we did add staff in some of our service departments like police, youth and rec, we did that by offsetting and removing some exempt positions. So there's some offset built into the additional positions. Now, the reality is we had a big growth year, right? So the projects that I talk about coming online, Roswell Park is a not-for-profit organization, but it pays a lease to a for-profit agency that owns the building that pays a full tax. And so projects that we put a lot of effort into seeing come to fruition like that, like some of the mixed-use properties that you see down at Main and Transit, some of the new apartment buildings that have gone up throughout the town that have come online and hit the assessment books this year were created this $582 million in new property value, which is an extraordinary growth for any community. This is the second time in our board's tenure, my board's 10 years, that we've been able to crest $500 million in new assessed value growth. Now, that is a growth year, and those are the years where you've grown your levy because it's absorbed by that. Admit that last year was a tough year and that we had a lot of complexity that hit last year. This year, we did our best to say, okay, let's go back, let's cut back, let's try to decrease this. And, our goal would be to do that again if we're so fortunate moving forward. I'm a little bit off my list here. I apologize. Regarding debt and payment, paying down debt. So, yes, when we did this presentation, we showed the comparables between 23 and 24. This year, we have, again, a large debt payment scheduled in the budget. We continue to make payments against our debt. That's been something that we've been able to do. We also have done, I think, a really good job working with the comptroller and the finance department of looking at past projects and making sure that they get closed out. A lot of municipalities, this town included, have had issues getting debt taken off the books, like things have been held open because the projects didn't get closed out. And we've made a really dedicated effort over the past 4 or 5 years to closing old debt and returning that to pay payment and interest. This year, where you saw that debt payment, that is principal and interest payment. Regarding the fund balance policy, I think that this slide is the fund balance study that you're referring to. It's on page 149. And fund balance is a percent of your budget, basically. It's a function of percent against the budget itself. Yeah, yes, yeah. Yep. This presentation that I did is on YouTube. Obviously, we can put the hard copy of the presentation on the website if it's not. Regarding the senior center audio, it is really good. The senior center has a lot of things that are really function well as a building. So I'm trying to replicate that. Maybe in a room like this isn't the easiest, but we agree that worked out pretty well. And who knows, maybe we'll try to we'll do some meetings there in the future. The ice ribbon, Dennis, I was saying that with the last few years of winters, it looks less feasible to actually pull off an ice ribbon in this area. That I was agreeing with that sentiment. Regarding the trails in phase one of that, the trailways that you see here are actually renovated cart paths. The cart paths are still there. They're broken up. They've need work, but we could repave them. And I think repaving the lower cart path network was something that we could do. Regarding getting trails to that site, I agree. I think that trails, especially up the old rail corridor that ran next to the I-290 in that area, offer some opportunities. We've looked at those in the past. And I believe what Tom Frank was referring to, although he's left right before I gave him the shout out, for the record, I did give him a shout out here, was back when I was village mayor, we had a concept of connecting Glen Park to the state park that we floated. And if you've never walked through Amherst State Park on the south end of it, if you follow the water, you can actually walk right into Glen Park. The problem is you have to walk back past the tennis center, and in that area, the embankment gets a little steep, and there's a lot of like Japanese knotweed and some not so nice invasives, but it's very inaccessible. So we had proposed a pathway that would have used some helical piers and a raised walkway through that area. It didn't go anywhere. We applied for a state grant. The town didn't back the project at the time, so we didn't get that state award. But I think that's specifically what he was talking about, was the connection between the two parks. And the other thing that he always talks about is when we obtained the state park land, and the mother's house broke up, the boiler plant for that property still exists on the site. It looks like a big bunker. There's still a smokestack that rises up. If you play golf at Park Country Club, you could probably get a good view of it. From the state park, though, if you drive in, you'd be able to see it pretty well. That was deemed historical as part of the overall property. The town's not figured out what to do with that building yet, and it's been a long time. Originally, the town board prior to me, the planning department had sought SHPO approval to demolish it. They weren't successful in obtaining that, so we're still trying to this day to figure out what to do with the boiler house. Tom's suggestion is to create a nature center there. That's the connections regarding Harlem Road. The playgrounds at Harlem Road are actually pretty good. Splash pad there is always an idea. Splash pads I think are important as we deal with however you think the climate has changed. The reality is we have an intense summer heat, and a lot of people don't have access to cooling pools, that type of thing. And providing child play with water play is more and more important. And so having splash pad and splash pad technology can be pretty low invasive. I'm a proponent of adding them almost everywhere we have playgrounds if we can, because it is certainly a benefit. So with that, if there are students, if you need any signatures, Sam will sign them up here in the corner. If you don't, that's fine. If students were walking out, I said if they need signatures, our attorney could sign them, but they didn't appear to. So with that, I'm going to motion to close the budget meeting, or budget public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? As I said, we are keeping
Don't
the,
we need to do the CIP?
and I'll motion to close the CIP public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? We are keeping the comment page open. Under state law, budget locks in November, at the end of November, around the 20th. As far as tracking changes, any amendment brought forth by a town board or myself would have to be added to the agenda and voted on. So it would appear in the agenda in advance of the meeting, and certainly have opportunities for comment on those during public expression. Okay. I'm going to move on. The next item on our agenda is public expression. So I'll motion to open public expression at this time.
Second.
All in favor? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, Tom Weisbeck was first on the list. Is Tom still here? Okay. He was here earlier. John Traber.
John Traver, 234 Mount Vernon Road. First of all, I'd like to thank Captain Sean Levin of the 107th Attack Wing Fatality Search and Recovery Team. Captain Levin was the officer in charge of a team that recently deployed to North Carolina to assist in recovery efforts related to Hurricane Helene. Captain Levin was quoted in one media source stating the devastation was the most he had ever seen in a military operation like this. Well, thank you. Now, Councilman Levin, I would hope that after witnessing such devastation, you'd want to make sure that the town of Amherst is well prepared and equipped to withstand any possible natural disaster that could happen in this area. Investing in the town's infrastructure and town equipment, along with having necessary departments at full manpower, seems the best way to do this. Our tax dollars should be devoted to keep this town safe, clean, and well-run, not for pet projects that are often proposed by our current supervisor, along with hiring non-essential employees appointed by the supervisor. If we did away with unneeded projects and hiring, we wouldn't have to bond so much. Perhaps we could eliminate some debt. I hope you give that some thought. On another topic, a local utility auditing company recently gave a presentation at a concerned citizen meeting. The president of the company, who is a town resident, informed us that his company, Troy and Banks, offers utility auditing to municipalities at virtually no cost. They simply receive compensation out of any savings they find for that municipality. Will this town board seek an audit from this company? And if not, why? A question for Ms. Berger. I was informed that this same auditing company, Troy and Banks, offered assistance during the LED lighting project and you turned them down. I'm just wondering why. Thank you.
Andrea Morganti.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Morganti, and I reside in Gettsville. We have heard on several occasions that there's a lack of participation to volunteer for town committees. One of the reasons may be that residents of the town are unaware of the vacancies that are currently needed to be filled. Recently, the Amherst Committee on Disabilities posted a request for volunteers to this committee. They advertised on Track Us, on their Facebook page, and also on the various Amherst Facebook pages. And by doing this, they are now receiving residents of the town who would like to serve. Councilman Zucala, at the last AGFA meeting, you didn't have a quorum, which resulted in a wasted meeting and was unable to accomplish anything for the residents of Amherst. The town residents are still waiting to have the 2 individuals who volunteer their services to be appointed. Also, we are confused that Ken Smith is no longer listed as being a member of this committee. It was our understanding that his resignation had to be brought before the town board for acceptance. And when did this occur? We also like to suggest that other town committees who are in need of volunteers follow the Amherst Committee on Disabilities example. However, if they do volunteer, how about appointing them? I'd also like to echo that this has been a very successful, transparent public budget hearing, and we would like to thank you.
Okay, Jane Cox. Oh, no, okay, thanks. Dennis Hoban.
Dennis Hoban. I had asked Mike Zucala if we could go to the Westwood Country Club and have another little tour. I was just wondering if he'd found out any information on that. We did spend a little time walking around there, but I'd like to have a little more in-depth look at that facility. $8 million is a lot of money to spend. I think some of the residents would like to take a closer look. I'd also like to know when you have any projection at all when this park would be open for the residents to use. I know they're parking cars over there now, but perhaps, for winter use, you could open it up. We could have some people could go snowshoeing or cross-country skiing. I don't think there's any hazard to that. Once the ground is frozen, I don't think there's any toxins sneaking out at that point, and might be a thing that you could use to get some use out of the park. So let me know about that. And Mike Zucala, maybe you can answer the question that I asked about when we can go and take another look. I think Chris Zangrowski was interested in going as well. Thank you.
Dave Howard.
Dave Howard, 194 Raycroft Boulevard. I first like to say that, because you might not know, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm unaffiliated. So I have no care who's up here, who's doing what. I just want the best for Amherst. On September 24th, the Town of Amherst Highway Department had a fuel leak that went into Ellicott Creek. I want to know, did Amherst get fined for the spill? And if so, how much? Also, what is being done to prevent any more accidental spills at the highway department? There's many waterfowl that are in that creek, and I know that spill went down the creek. I don't know how far, but I think something should be done to stop any more spills from going in there. To the Royal Park project, Amherst is obligated for 7.2 million. New York State Heat Cap grant, 2.4 million. Damon University has put $0 toward this project, but retains control of the sporting portion of the facility. Originally, when this park was proposed, Damon was going to lease the facility from Amherst, which I thought would have been a sizable amount, not $1 per year. That is not rent. It is an insult to Amherst, Erie County, and New York State taxpayers that are building this facility. Damon University should be responsible for the complete upkeep of the entire Royal Park complex, to include garbage dumpster service, plowing winter snow in the parking lot, all grass cutting, the daily cleanup of the bathrooms, and really they should be in charge of taking care of the splash pad too. This is the minimum that they should be doing, and it would take the burden off the Amherst taxpayers for taking care of that sports complex that they're using and controlling. It's a small ask for them for what they are getting. Thank you.
Aaron, Chris?
Can I get this picture put up? Yeah, well, I wanted to show the houses on this one. But go back to that. That's okay. Chris Strongoski, Youngs Road. Back to this splash pad, playground, winter market area, natural playground, whatever. I have a picture. There are not many homes on Morgan Parkway, and quite a few of them actually have pools. But if I don't believe any parent is going to allow their children to cross over Sheridan Drive with the amount of traffic that goes through there to this facility. Now, I just think I know you got the grant money, that's great, but I think there's better places to put the splash pad, the winter market, and there's playgrounds, as you mentioned, that needed upgrading. That money should go to there. The splash pad, I'm 100% behind putting that splash pad at Harlem Road Community Center on the Bernhardt side. I used to walk when I lived on Hamilton. I used to walk there when I lived on Amherst Road. And I think that that neighborhood would utilize it far more than they're going to utilize Morgan Parkway, because there's really only about 30 homes over there. The winter market, I think that should be moved to Bassett Park. Bassett Park has a wonderful summer market. This could complement it. People go there. It's well known. I think it's just really a natural to put it at Bassett Park. It would just blend very nicely. This ice ribbon thing, if we ever get there, I think that should go to Clearfield. It's going to get far more usage than it's going to get at this particular location. And I still think we want to keep this location open. We don't want to start putting things there. I did mention a senior housing facility, and the reason I brought it up is because the corner there is very similar to the corner on Maple Road where Fay Brook Senior Living is. And if any of you had to put your parents into a senior home or living situation, you'll know that in Amherst, every senior facility is on a waiting list. It is impossible to get in there, and there is a huge need for senior housing. I can't emphasize it enough. After talking with Councilmember Sakala the other day, I never realized how urgent and how big the need is for senior housing. We really need to focus on that as a town, and there is a possibility of doing that. So what I'm asking is that I would hope that this board, let's take a step back and utilize, like I said, I think the winter market area would be a big hit at Bassett Park, where the summer market does phenomenally well. The splash pad at Harlem Road would be very, very successful and utilized. And the money for the playground could go to other playgrounds and utilize that money for there. And I'm more than happy to volunteer for a committee on and for the comment that was made earlier that I've got some type of deal with Brian, I assure you, we don't. And I have not talked to any town board member about the concept plan. We intentionally did not want to, so we didn't want to be working with anyone until we announced it, because we don't want people to think that there's some backroom deal, that I'm tied in with some developer or some builder. We just want to throw it out there and something to think about for the town. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Good evening, town board members. Don Smith, North Lawn. Just a simple comment. I came up here and I think I oversold this concept of openness, but just after hearing what I just heard, I would like to reiterate that once more. Again, what we're going to have, the Amherst Central Park has been a complete, I don't want to use a bad word here, okay, for a long time. It's hard enough just to get to do one or two things there. Now you're going to essentially golf. Okay, how many people golf? I don't golf. I never did. I'm never going to. Sorry, I don't. I don't even putt. Okay, so what is it about that that's sort of driving this whole process? I just don't get it. Okay, we should really look at the concept of thinking first and building second. Okay. Rather than building first and thinking second. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are you folks coming up to speak? No? Okay, okay. Go ahead. If somebody's coming up to speak, please.
Shelley Schratz, Amherst. First, I would like to thank this board for the way you've presented everything tonight. Compared to last year, it was a little different. And I also want to thank you for taking the time to meeting for many of the residents. Some of you have met with us often, and that you continue to do that. The other thing I'd like to say is that, Chris talks about having people get involved. You've talked about the comprehensive master plan, and this is no different than that. It's time, I think, you've all said it, and that we really focus on putting those people from the community together. All parts of the community, not just people that are here, because they have a say. And the referendum, what the referendum did is give the people the trust that their voices would be heard. And so for that, I think we're starting off at a good year. And I just want to thank you, and for being respectful and transparent. And if we could be more transparent, and I think that's a good sign.
Okay, anybody else? I'm going to address these, and then we can go a motion to close public expression.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Regarding utility auditing, is something that we did do in the village. We actually audited.
We actually have done it in the town 2 times recently.
Okay, thank you. We did do it in the village successfully. It's something I'm always open to. We just have to to be mindful of what we're auditing and what the goals are. The goal of an audit, yes, audits can recoup funding, but the goal of an audit should be to fix the problem first. So I'm always willing to talk to companies about utility audits. Like I said, we've had some success. Linda and I've worked with successful audits in the past. Regarding committees, I think obviously we've got some repair work to do with some of our committees, just in terms of how our committees are structured, whether we have committees on the books that really aren't as necessary and whether are missing committees that we need. I think as we go into a comprehensive plan, it's a good time to take a look at the committees, because we're going to have to add new committees around the comprehensive plan, steering committees and groups like that. So cleaning up the committees, but probably doing like a virtual and live in-person open house for committees to talk about what each committee does and have representatives and liaisons from the committees here would be a good idea. So it's something that I haven't vetted that with anybody. Admittedly, the rest of my board could be giving me dagger eyes. I don't know, but it seems like we could do that. As far as opening the park for winter use, the portion of the park that we're talking about, it's already been kind of cleared by DEC. And I think that there could be some opportunity for that. We have to think about what we want to do there and how we want to do it. We're talking about spring construction and formal opening of some portions of the park next year, probably in the fall. As far as the fuel leak goes, so with all due respect to highway, it was not highway, it was actually the engineering. It's our sewer and stormwater group that had the leak. It was a fuel leak off the back of it's a fuel tank on the back of a pickup truck that was parked near the creek. Suffice to say, the first thing we should do is not back up trucks that have fuel sitting on them near the creek. So in practice, we're changing some things. But the other thing is, if you're talking about the cost of $1,000 or $2,000 fuel tank, we haven't been fined that I know of yet, but we should not feel like we need to do welded repairs on fuel tanks of whatever age, and we should just be replacing them with new line tanks on the back of our vehicles. I'm sure that everyone would say we didn't have the budget for it. I assure you that we do have budget for those types of things. But yes, there's some lessons learned. The fuel, as far as I know, has been cleaned up, at least to the best of the town and DEC's ability. We're still kind of waiting for some outcome testing. As far as the Damon and Royal Park go, we have asked Damon to submit formal schedules for use of the facility, and we are negotiating operations costs with them. That was part of our intent. We are meeting with Damon regarding that stuff. Regarding the slide that I showed on the projects in Central Park, I will just say that whether Central Park plans defined park for anybody who in this room or other people, the reality is we did go through a very exhaustive study looking at what people want and what people felt we needed in parks. Whether it was the Morningside community, the community to the west of the park, and the communities to the east of the park, we ultimately think that we have the ability to build a Billy Wilson-esque destination playground here, which we need more large, fully accessible playgrounds. It will take some pressure off of some of the smaller parks. I do think it's a good idea in that corner. Regardless of whatever you think about bringing golf back or not, that corner is an opportunity for us to allow everybody from this town to have direct access to park space. Splash pads aren't just happenstance. Oh, let's run down the street and play in a splash pad. Most kids going to splash pads have parent with them. So I would just say, there are going to be parts of this park that we're going as a board to say we're still doing this. We have a commitment to the community, and we have elected officials besides us, and the county legislature, state senate, state assembly, even the assembly, the assembly chair, right, the speaker of the assembly in New York State, who believe in that opportunity for that playground. So there are going to be things here that have to be wicked into whatever the new plan for Westwood or the Central Park area is. We've talked about, if you talk to our rec department, they would advocate for reopening the pool and lining it. There's a lot of opportunities. We have to figure out what's best for us, and we have to honor some commitments we've already made to communities of users. Again, there's 170 acres and a lot of opportunity for a lot of different organizations. And as far as the transparency piece goes, maybe the one thing Chris and I agree on in the past 6 months is that he and I definitely have not colluded. So, opportunity for levity. Anyways,
When you're done.
yeah. What? So, all right. Go ahead.
I just want to clarify about Troy and Banks. During the vetting process and choosing a vendor, Troy and Banks was part of one group that was not chosen. And they had done it recently, a number of years ago, and recouped money. But right now, we have a very accurate accounting of the lights through the GIS process 2 times.
But that said, we do have a lot of other metered town
Yes.
locations, and that is ultimately an opportunity, both gas and electric, and for that matter. So with that, I'm going to
Wait, Angela.
sorry, go ahead.
So I do want to make sure that it's clear that obtaining grants often includes specific locations for where those grants are to be used. We don't just get the money to then move them around at different locations. It may require amendment to the grant money may go away. You can't just move to different locations. As a parent who does live in this area and who drives my rush hour traffic turning Sheridan out of North Forest every single day, I do see people crossing. However, I'm a mom first always. I use the splash pad at Clearfield. I use the great playgrounds at Harlem. I go to Billy Wilson. I've never let my children who are of age walk to a park by themselves. And while I may cross Sheridan, I haven't yet done it with my children. There is a crosswalk there. I do see people who use it, so it is a safe intersection in that sense. But again, times may have changed. I don't frequently see younger elementary age children at these playgrounds and splash pads, and I do frequent those areas. You've likely seen me there if you've seen me run around after my children. And then the other thing I did want to clarify from a little bit earlier about the reassessments, it's not changing the disbursement of a pie, it is growing the entire pie. So when we look at your assessment increased 100,000 or your assessment increased X amount, you want to look at the 0% rate, which was 70% increase in your total value, is where you would see your property taxes either remain the same or go lower. More than 70%, you may have seen an increase. Thankfully, our budget this year includes a rate decrease. So that $582 million that the supervisor spoke about does not include the assessment. It is new properties coming onto the tax rolls. And while we have nothing to do with school taxes, they do have their own elections. They're in May. I believe it was May 14th this year, May 16th, something like that. The assessment itself did not impact that. So what you see is when you have a bigger pie, your entire rate goes down, and that's where you see the more equitable distribution for those who own property. As we're looking, we look at different exemptions, different things. There's conversations of increasing the senior tax income exemptions and things like that. That will change the rate per individual property owner, but it is important that when we're talking reassessment, we weren't specifically increasing everybody's value and the same pie. Those are my big points that I want to make sure we're clear on the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to ask the town clerk to please read this evening's consent agenda.
Town Attorney 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Assessor 1, 2, 3, 4. Building Maintenance 1, 2. Controller 1, 2, 3. Contract Compliance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Engineering 1, 2. Highway 1, 2, 3, 4. Human Resources 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Planning 1. Police 1, 2, 3, 4. Sewer Plant 16, 1, 2. Youth and Recreation 1. Communications 1. Consent 2. Consent 3. Refer to attorney and planning. 4. Refer to attorney. 5. Refer to attorney. 6. Refer to attorney. Public improvement permits 1 is consent and 2 is consent. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to motion to adopt this evening's consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next item on the agenda is the second round of public expression. I'm going to motion to open that now. Oh,
Second.
no, I thought we were holding it. I'm not going to try to introduce it. It wasn't published. That's fine. We're just going to hold it. Yeah, so, okay, fine. So we had one agenda item that did not apparently get bound into the budget. Budget. It was my resolution 855. It's the replacement of the B&HV MOU. The last MOU envisioned a move to Central Park. So obviously we're reworking that. I do need to come back to this, but since it wasn't bound into the agenda, I'm going to motion to withdraw it for the evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That said, I'm going to motion to open the second round of public expression.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody have anything?
Hi, Bob Dirtle, 92 Chateau Terrace. Wondering about 22 Chateau Terrace. The garage was torn down last January. It's still sitting there in pieces. The electrical service has been removed from the house months ago. That was brought up to this town board. Winter's coming. Is this house going to be just let go till it falls apart so Benderson does get their way with it? Or is something going to be done to winterize it?
Yep.
Jane Cox, Harlem Road. Since Bob brought up 22 Chateau, I would like to know, last February, when the debris from the main Chateau building blew all over the neighborhood, there were a variety of environmental tests done on the property, including the New York State Department of Health lead testing, which apparently the neighbors were told that they would get the results. I believe it was going to be in May, then it became July, then it became October, and now it's January. What is holding this up? Does anybody know?
I can answer all the questions right at the end, but yes.
Chris Strongoski, Youngs Road. I'll shift gears here a little bit. Boulevard Mall. Now, we had an eminent domain process going on, and J.C. Penney is not challenging the eminent domain. At least that's what I read in the paper. Now, the next step would be a judge has to reward or award damages for the taking of their property. We haven't heard anything recently with Boulevard Mall. So my question is, what is the status of the lawsuit with J.C. Penney that the town is involved with? I am very happy to see that the private sector is going to develop this, and the residents of the town are not going to have this redevelopment cost put on their backs. So that's a good sign. I don't necessarily agree with 10 stories. I don't think that's the American dream. But, you know, we'll see what comes out of this. But I'd like to know where we are, if we can say, the status with JCPenney in the litigation, the eminent domain process. Thank you.
Okay.
Dave Hard, 194 Rycroft. Just a quick question on the school taxes. Our house got assessed like $525,000. I appealed it. It got reduced to $495. I think the original assessment was like $435 or $465. But the school taxes, it was assessed at $500,000. How does that number come about? I'm not sure if you can even answer that, or I need to go to the assessor. I'm just wondering how they came up with that number.
Okay.
Again, Don Smith, North Long. At one point in my career, I worked in the actual same place back at the Ridgely Road. There was a startup company I was working for back then. And getting out into traffic and making a left-hand turn into traffic, for most 7 or 8 months of the year, it wasn't so bad. It wasn't really all that bad. It was a very narrow road. But when Christmas came around, it was a reasonably high-end disaster. You couldn't get out if your life depended on it until you could get it all, because the traffic was coming in and out of the Consumer Square, coming around Ridgely Road, coming in every direction you can think of, from up and down, everywhere you could think of. Traffic was enormous at around the Christmas time frame. Now, I don't know if the changes in buying patterns is going to cut down on traffic or not. Essentially, online is going to take some of the pressure off. I don't know that. But this was a long time ago when online was not a big thing. So I do not know what the traffic pattern is going to be at Christmas time frame if you have a narrow road in that area and you have Costco there and you have Dick's there. I think you may want to look into that one. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dennis Hoban. I wasn't sure if you had addressed the idea of forming a committee for whatever, a project, whatever you want to call it, the Westwood Country Club. Did you address that?
No, I didn't. I will, though.
Okay. And you also didn't address, I asked Mike Zucala if we could look at have a tour of the Westwood Country Club. I don't believe you addressed that either.
I can't address that one.
Why not?
I'm not Mike Zucala.
Well, he takes his marching orders. He takes his marching order. He told me he's got to check with someone. I don't know. I'm assuming that's you, Brian.
Dennis,
He'll get back to me and check with someone. This microphone is terrible. I think it's a good idea to have a committee where you have some participation from the citizens. I think it's very foolish for you to go ahead, Brian, and put in the splash pad, the winter garden, the ice skating rink, or whatever you call it, the ice ribbon, all these different things, just because you got these grants. I think there's probably, if you looked into it, there's probably a process where you can amend these grants and move it to a different park. I'm sure it's not that complicated, and you could do it if you wanted to. I think the gentleman here, Chris, came up with some excellent ideas as to alternatives. You could still accomplish the same thing in a much better way if you think about it. I don't think you should go into this Westwood Country Club, Central Park, as you call it, Amherst Central Park, willy-nilly at the end of your career here and just stick a few things over there to make it look like you're actually doing something with the Westwood Country Club. I think you need to form a plan, and you need to involve the citizens. It's silly to move forward with this. Okay, well, let's just put a winter market over here, and let's put a splash pad over there, and let's do this, let's do that. That park is 171 acres. The Westwood Country Club, let's call it, because it's not a park right now. It's a parking lot. And you got 171 acres. You should formulate a plan.
Got it.
You said you're an urban planner. I mean, just don't do this willy-nilly and stick a few things over there and say, look what I did, you know?
Okay.
It just doesn't work, Brian. Get some community involvement. If you don't want to work with me, get somebody else. Get a golf pro. Get a retired golf pro.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I'm going to motion to close the public expression.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Okay. 22 Chateau Terrace. So right now, I'm allowed to say with the update on the Article 78 challenge. So there's an Article 78 challenge that was brought against the planning board and Benderson on the project. The state Supreme Court found a ruling in the town's favor, said town did the EIS correctly, went through the process correctly. The resident group that brought that Article 78 had asked for the ability to perfect an appeal. I think we're on the second extension of time. Yeah. So basically, we're in a holding pattern. Everything over there, any construction's in a holding pattern now, because the fourth department's allowed them some more time to try to perfect an appeal. So everything's stuck in limbo. Regarding environmental testing and lead specifically, if the state health department tested something and has results, we do not know that they need to make that release. I don't have any information on that. I just have nothing on it. So we will ask the state, but we don't have, the town is not holding testing information. Regarding the Boulevard Mall, eminent domain action, so Penny's is not appealing. They dropped their lawsuit. There is no active lawsuit with the town. That said, there's a value on their building, and they would like to continue operating in their building. So part of the reason for the eminent domain action was to break things like lease agreements. Penny's had a lease agreement that said there had to be an active mall next to them. Penny's had a lease agreement that said they had to have view rights across the entirety of the property, and you couldn't build anything in front of them on Niagara Falls Boulevard. The eminent domain action basically nullifies that stuff, but whether or not they stay in their building, relocate on the site, relocate off the site, negotiate a value for their space, that's all being discussed now. Penny's has started that process with their attorneys and our attorneys. We have no reason to push Penny's off the site anytime soon, nor do we want to pay for a Penny's building. So we're content to talk and figure out what should happen there. But again, so there are a couple anchors there. Dick's is moving down the road. That leaves, because apparently TGI Fridays is now closed. So that leaves the Macy's and the Penny's. Both have expressed interest in staying. Penny's owns their building, Macy's does not. And that's the difference between the two at the moment. So we'll see. Regarding school taxes and the assessors, you have to ask the assessor. I have no idea. Regarding Bailey and Consumer Square Christmas, the traffic modeling that we did in the EIS looked at peak times and peak days. So we would have modeled for that, albeit Costco and Target have more. It's goofy over there because when UB's out, there's actually, you can make an argument that some of their numbers, their daily trips fall off, and so it's replaced possibly for some holiday travel, but the numbers weren't that crazy. The improvement that we showed at Bailey plus the changes that they are making on Bailey themselves do loosen up traffic. It doesn't decrease traffic. It allows traffic to move in a different pattern. Regarding a committee with ACP or Central Park, we had a committee. We worked all the way through design with a committee. That committee met regularly. It was chaired by John Dandies, and had meetings that established the plan that we had in front of us. So it's not like that was done without a committee. Moving forward, we'll have to figure out what we're doing here with this park, and we'll start to figure out how to do that. As we work towards that, obviously, we actively receive comments about what people would like to see there. And forming a plan. So the last plan was formed with community input. We held community input sessions. Originally, we had hired WSP planning to do visioning meetings. We held some at Gettsville Fire Hall. We also asked for Central Park input at all of our community meetings at fire halls for a few years in a row. We held some stakeholder meetings here with various user groups, including people who were representatives of PTAs and representatives of senior organizations. And that's how we got to the plan that we got to. Obviously, Arts Committee was part of it. So obviously there's a change here. So the next few years will be about where to go next. With that, I'm going to motion to adjourn the board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.